My name is Zach Mottl, and the company is Atlas Tool and Die Works, and my title is Chief Alignment Officer. We're a precision manufacturer, and we're unique among a lot of manufacturers because of the diversity of products that we manufacture. So it's precision metal, it's sheet metal fabrication, metal stamping, and then precision machined and turned products. And we really like to take the products and put them into assemblies. So we make a lot of parts and pieces for different industries. We also make assemblies and sub-assemblies. We're a fourth-generation family business. My great-grandfather actually started the business in 1918 in Chicago, and we made dies and jigs and fixtures for the industry that was growing around Chicago in the early 1900s, in particular the telecom industry, and that was a really important one for Atlas. We grew up with the telecom industry. We made housings for phone switching equipment. So as the phone networks grew from the early 1900s up until today, we have been involved making the housings, the boxes, the covers, the brackets, everything that goes in the central office for phone switching equipment. And that was a really important industry that grew for us for a long time. Tax policy and trade strategy have combined to affect companies like mine, Atlas Tool, and a lot of small, mid-sized, and really large manufacturers. And I think the general public doesn't always know how these things come together. And I think sometimes the policymakers and the decision makers who get to vote on these policies don't always understand how this picture fits together. It's really complicated, but it does have real-world impact right on the shop floor here. As we have bad trade policy, bad tax policy, and we don't manipulate our currency, we're at a triple disadvantage to countries that do. There are countries that have very aggressive trade policy, they have very aggressive tax policy, and they aggressively manipulate their currency. So this is what we see in the United States manufacturing industry. It's why we have to be so much ahead on technology, on efficiency. It's why we do so much to talk about the regulatory burden here in the U.S. Anything we can do to help U.S. manufacturers compete against these three unfair things, and anything we can do to change our system to get in alignment. I think that the biggest problem for the United States as we trade is that our tax policy is not in alignment with our trading partners. I think that the other two legs of the stool are important, but if we could get comprehensive tax reform that would lower the corporate income tax and perhaps replace some of the revenue with a border adjustable tax or a VAT tax of some sort, we could really fund our government, we could fill a lot of the holes that we have in DC in terms of revenue, and we could also give U.S. manufacturing a big leg up, boost jobs, boost employment, and I think we would see a win-win all around. Around 2000, there were trade policies that were passed in the 90s, and there were tax policies that have been passed and changed constantly throughout time. And around 2000, that's when it really started accelerating, when those forces came together and we saw a fundamental change in the industry, and that was that our customers stopped making things in the US anymore. We were part of a global supply chain, and I think a lot of small manufacturers like myself, they have a big customer, a big Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 customer, and that might be their biggest customer, and they have many other ones within that, but we all feed in that global supply chain. So in 2000, my global supply chain, the telecom and electronics industry, stopped making things in the US. They found contract manufacturers in Asia, they found contract manufacturers in South America and Mexico. They chased the low-cost manufacturing, and in many cases, those locations that they moved the manufacturing to, those governments were putting policies in place that subsidized that manufacturing and made it very inexpensive and artificially inexpensive to do business there. So I don't blame my big customers for doing what they had to survive, but the impact was that small businesses like me got cut out. Instead of shipping the product here to New Jersey or to Oklahoma or somewhere else where they would assemble it, now we're shipping to Mexico. And then we stopped shipping to Mexico altogether. When they went to Asia, it was no longer cost effective to make boxes here, ship them there, put the electronics in it, and ship it back to the US to be built. Atlas, at the time, we employed about 80 people then. That was in the year 2000. It's now 16 years later. We're finally back to employing about 80 people. At that time, our sales went in half. We had to cut our staff significantly. We lost money for about 2 years, and by 2003, we couldn't keep losing money and we kept thinking it was going to come back, and it clearly wasn't by 2003, so we cut our staff. I remember the day I had to fire 30 people. I remember how hard it was for me. I remember the night before crying about it, and just really, it was very emotional. I mean, it's painful. I mean, anybody would have a hard time firing these people that had worked here a long time, and I knew their families, and they'd worked here for most of them over a decade. So terminating 30 people was really tough for me. I can't imagine how it was for them. I'm the one who kept my job. They're the ones who lost their job, and it was directly because industry left America, left the U.S. These were things that we'd been making, again, since the early 1900s. These were jobs that were growing, were progressing. We didn't make the same thing, but technology progressed. We had opportunity here for a long time, and that suddenly changed. So that was painful for them and painful for us. Our company, you know, as a business and as a family, we're a family-owned business. We put in almost $1 million of money to keep the company afloat out of my family's reserves and my family's savings. So we invested, we spent a lot of money, we lost money during those years. Our team lost their jobs, so it was really painful. I don't blame my customers, I don't blame the countries. I blame ourselves for putting bad policy in place in the U.S. and letting this happen. We've made bad decisions, from tax to trade to other things, that have made it impossible for these supply chains not to move. We're one of the companies that survived, though. There were so many that didn't. Those of us who have survived have found a niche, found a market, and found a way to be successful. So many people aren't here to tell you their story today, and aren't here to tell you what happened to them and the pain that they went through. So, you know, I think it's so important. And why, to me, manufacturing jobs are the most important job in any economy. It is one of the building blocks of anything. And I think CPA members are well represented by the organization. Manufacturers, farmers, ranchers, I say if you don't build it, mine it, or grow it, you're just shuffling the money around. So people who really build it, mine it, and grow it, that's where we're creating wealth. Manufacturing is one of those, and manufacturing is even a little different than farming and ranching and other things because we require so many factors of input. Look around me here, there's machines, there's tools, there's safety equipment, safety goggles. There's so many things that support manufacturing, and so they say, most economists agree, that for every one person employed in manufacturing, like myself, there's 2 to 3 supporting jobs in the service industry. The truck that delivers my product, the people that make the paper that we use in our copier to make our blueprints. So all of these things are why manufacturing is such a high multiplier effect, and why those other countries are so smart to go after these jobs, and why we're really missing the boat in keeping these jobs here. So I'm very much in favor of trade, and I think that U.S., our manufacturers, we need to export more. But buying products overseas and bringing it here, that's not working. And so these trade policies that we've put in place, we forgot a couple things. We forgot to make sure that there was something back for the U.S. Too often, we put in place free trade policies that removed tariffs and removed barriers and made it very inexpensive to go overseas, but those other countries either A, didn't drop their barriers for products coming there, they are not held to labor standards, environmental standards, all sorts of regulation that we have to deal with here that is a cost of doing business. And so when we negotiated these, we weren't smart enough to ask that they follow the same rules that we do. And I know we can't always control our trading partners. Maybe they don't want to agree to these rules. Well, maybe we shouldn't have given them access to our market. We are the big market. We are the big cherry on top here. There's no reason that these people, if they want access to our markets and they want our goods and they want our dollars, they really should be willing to follow the rules that we set in place in order to get that access. But the other part of it, besides trade agreements, is tax policy. And so things like VAT and BAT taxes, and maybe folks realize value-added taxes or border adjustable taxes are what the BAT taxes are. In our country, we have an income tax. And so when we send, for example, General Motors, they build a wonderful Cadillac and they go to export it to Germany. That Cadillac has got the income tax at every level of manufacture built into it, from the people who made the seats to the people who made the door locks, the windows, to General Motors taxes. So that whole tax scheme is built in the price of the product. But when the Germans ship a BMW our way, they get the VAT tax refunded to them. So what it is, it's a hidden subsidy on exports and a tax on imports. So we say we have free trade with Mexico. We've got the NAFTA in place, right? And there's free trade. Well, there really isn't free trade because Mexico has a border adjustable tax. So it is in essence a tariff. It is no different than a tariff, except it's called something different. So when we ship product to Mexico, it's tariff free, but it gets a border adjustable tax applied to it, which is essentially a sales tax. So when they ship product here, it just comes in tariff free, and we fail to collect that tax. And that could be used for so many different things to help our country grow and help our manufacturers here. I love the CPA. I've been involved with them, I think, since the beginning, some of their early days, and You know, at that time, it was around the time when my business had changed so fundamentally, and I still had this belief that we could bring it back. It had changed so much. So I got involved with CPA to be a voice for trade policy and smart trade policy, smart tax policy. I saw a lot of other groups, you know, the National Association of Manufacturers, there was a split. Some people believed that we should fight for this, and the larger manufacturers who drove a lot of the membership decisions didn't want to get in this fight because they were benefiting from these trade policies. And again, I don't blame them, but we needed somebody to speak up for the voice of the smaller manufacturer who really is the majority of the employment in the US. We needed someone to speak up for that, and I thought CPA was a great voice for it.